Most backyard tomato gardens today are built to produce once. The old systems weren't. They were designed to keep going until frost, and most people have completely forgotten how they worked. May is exciting, June looks promising. July delivers the first real harvest and everything feels like it worked. Then August arrives, the heat builds, the plant starts slowing down, and by September the season feels like it's winding up. They pull the plants, turn the soil, and start thinking about next year. What they don't realize is that everything they built, the planting hole, the root system, the watering habits, was built to produce through October. The system was capable of more. The season just wasn't set up to use it. We've covered the planting hole, we covered the waiting window, we covered how to water. This video is about the part nobody talks about, how to connect all of it into something that actually runs as a system instead of a single harvest event. If you haven't seen those videos yet, all three are linked in the description. They're worth watching before this one. The 4 things I'm going to show you are old, none of them are complicated, and almost nobody uses all of them together anymore, which is exactly why most backyards stop producing in August when they could be going until frost. There's one of these 4 that most people have never even considered. It's also the one that makes the biggest difference. I'll get to it last, but stay through all 4 because they only work when they're connected. Before getting into the 4 pieces, something needs to be said about how most gardens are designed, even when the gardener doesn't realize they've made a design decision. Most gardens are built around a single event. Everything goes in at once, peaks at once, and declines at once. The gardener gets one window of abundance, a few weeks in July and August where the counter is covered in tomatoes and nobody in the house can eat them fast enough. Then it's over. The plants come out, the bed sits empty. The family goes back to the store. A food system produces in waves. When one thing is declining, something else is entering its peak. The household draws from it continuously instead of scrambling to process a glut and then waiting 6 months for next season. That shift from a garden that produces once to a backyard that produces until the season closes is what this video is about, and it starts with the piece that almost nobody thinks about until it's too late in the season to do anything about it. Successive planting. The first time I tried this, I almost talked myself out of it. I had my tomatoes in the ground, they were doing well, and the idea of starting a second round felt like extra work for a benefit I couldn't quite picture yet. I did it anyway. Started a second set of seedlings 3 weeks after the first planting went in. By the time those second plants went into the ground, the first ones were already setting fruit. I remember standing in the backyard looking at both sets thinking they looked completely out of sync. One planting already carrying tomatoes, the other barely past the waiting window. That out-of-sync feeling is exactly the point. When the first planting peaked in late July, the second was building momentum. When the first plant started slowing in August, fewer flowers, smaller fruit, the natural decline of a plant that has been producing for weeks, the second planting was just hitting its stride. The counter stayed covered. The household kept pulling from the garden instead of the store. The season didn't end, it just changed which plants were carrying it. 2 plantings is enough to feel the difference. In most American growing zones, a gap of 2 to 3 weeks between plantings creates enough offset to cover the natural decline of the first round. 3 plantings, if your season allows it, turns a small backyard into something that produces from July until the first hard frost without a gap. The same beds, the same space, used twice instead of once. The second piece is where the physical setup changes, and where a lot of productive space gets abandoned every season. Most backyard gardeners use tomato cages. Cages work for determinate tomatoes, the compact varieties that produce one flush and stop. For indeterminate tomatoes, the ones that keep producing all season, cages are the wrong tool. By July, the plant has outgrown them. The stems fall over the edges, the center packs with crossing branches. Airflow is gone, and what started as a managed plant has become a jungle that's hard to harvest and harder to keep healthy. Vertical string trellising changes all of that. 3 T-posts, a length of conduit across the top, strings hanging down to each plant. The whole structure costs less than a single season of replacement cages and handles plants twice the size without the management problems. The technique that makes it work is training 2 leaders instead of 1. When the plant reaches its first natural fork, you run each leader up its own string. 2 leaders means roughly double the flower clusters from the same root system you spent May building. That root system, the one the bone meal and Epsom salt and correct watering built, now has twice as much plant to feed. It was capable of this the whole time. Most gardens just never give it the structure to do it. Growing vertically also keeps the plant open. Light gets into the center, air moves through it. A plant with good airflow through its core stays healthy weeks longer than one packed into a cage, and those extra weeks, in a system built around successive planting, are the weeks that matter most. Now here's where the system starts doing something most gardens never do. A vertical trellis creates shade, not a problem, an asset. The north-facing side of a tomato row gets filtered light for most of the day. That ground directly in the shadow of the trellis is some of the most productive space in the summer garden. Most people leave it empty. Lettuce planted in that shade in July does something lettuce can't do in July sun. It grows without bolting. It stays mild, stays tender, and produces through August, while the lettuce in full sun has been bitter and gone to seed for a month. Spinach does the same, arugula. Most leafy greens that summer heat normally kills extend their season by weeks in the cool shadow of a tomato row. On the sunny side, cucumbers change the math again. Train them up their own strings alongside the trellis, and their broad leaves shade the lower tomato fruit from direct afternoon sun, which prevents sun scald on the varieties most prone to it. They produce at the same time the tomatoes are producing, pulling from different soil depths, so there's no competition for the same resources. 2 crops from the same footprint of ground, both at peak production simultaneously. Basil at the base, garlic at the ends of the row. Not because of companion planting theory, just because the space is there, the conditions suit it, and a productive backyard doesn't leave ground empty when something useful could be growing in it. Every time I walk that trellis row in July, I'm looking at 3 layers of production from one strip of garden, tomatoes on the strings, cucumbers climbing alongside them, leafy greens producing in the shade below. All of it from a bed that most gardeners would have planted with tomatoes and left the rest to weeds. The 4th piece is the one most gardeners skip, and it costs them 2 to 3 weeks of harvest every single year. 30 days before your first expected frost date, top the plant. Cut the growing tip off every main leader. This one feels wrong the first time. The plant is still alive, still growing. Cutting the top off feels like giving up on it early. But here's what's actually happening in those last 30 days. A tomato needs roughly a month to ripen from the moment a flower gets pollinated to the moment the fruit is ready to eat. Any new growth the plant puts out in the last 4 weeks of the season will never produce a ripe tomato. It will flower, maybe set fruit, and then get killed by frost while everything is still green. The plant spent energy on it and the household got nothing from it. Topping stops that. Every tomato already set on the vine gets the full energy of the root system behind it. They ripen faster, more completely, and the harvest continues right up to the last week of the season instead of ending with a bucket of green tomatoes that never had a chance. One decision, 30 days before frost. That's what separates pulling green tomatoes off a dead plant in October from harvesting ripe fruit until the week before Thanksgiving in warmer zones. 4 pieces, and each one only works because of the one before it. Successive planting only delivers if the second set of plants is built the same way as the first. Same planting hole, same patience through the waiting window, same deep watering that builds roots instead of dependence. Done carelessly, the timing offset falls apart before it starts. The vertical trellis only carries 2 leaders if the root system underneath is strong enough to feed them through a full season. A plant watered shallow in May doesn't have that infrastructure, it struggles under the load. The companion planting only works because the trellis creates the shade. You can't grow lettuce in August without the vertical structure that makes August shade possible, and topping only matters if the plant has been producing long enough that there's meaningful fruit on the vine worth protecting. A plant built correctly from May has been carrying fruit for weeks by the time the frost calendar matters. A plant that struggled through summer on poor roots doesn't have much to top. This is what makes it a system. Remove any one piece and the others produce less. Keep all four and they multiply each other. I want to say something directly about why this matters beyond the garden. A backyard that produces tomatoes in July is a hobby. A backyard that produces continuously from July through October with enough surplus to preserve is something different. It's a household that goes into winter with 3 months of food it grew itself. A family that felt food prices spike at the store and didn't feel it the same way at the table. A level of practical independence that most people assume requires land they don't have or time they can't afford. It doesn't require either. It requires a system. A small backyard set up correctly produces more usable food than most families expect, not because of any single technique, but because of how the techniques connect. This is the difference this channel exists to show. Not hobby gardening, not survival fantasy. A backyard that works hard, produces consistently, and makes the household more resilient. Through food it grew and knows and controls. The 4 videos in this series are one complete system. The planting hole in May, the patience of the waiting window, the watering that builds roots instead of dependence, and the system thinking that connects all of it from first planting to last frost. That system is available to anyone with a backyard and the willingness to build it right from the beginning. Drop a comment and tell me, are you running one planting this season or two? And if you've already tried successive planting, tell me what the gap between your first and second harvest looked like. I read every single one, and the answers from this series have shaped every video in it. If this way of thinking about your backyard resonates, subscribe. Every week through the growing season, one topic, one practical move that changes how much your backyard actually produces. The season isn't over when the first harvest comes in. That's just where the real system starts. I'd go look at a calendar today and count back 30 days from your average first frost date. Write that date down somewhere visible. That's your topping day. And knowing it before you need it is the difference between a deliberate system and a season that just happens to you.